Hi all, I have a fantastic game to show you from the US Chess Championship, which is currently underway. Wesley So was playing Akobian in round 5. Akobian is a French defense expert, and they had a game last year which was a bit short because there was a rule violation. Wesley So actually got defaulted for making a note on his score sheet. Okay, yeah, so were they going to have a game this time? Let's see what happened. E4 from Wesley. An aggressive first move. I think Wesley's repertoire is pretty wide. You can also play D4. But E4 kind of indicates this could be a more aggressive, violent game. We see the French defense. D4, D5. And now there's two main choices. Knight c3 or knight d2. Knight d2 is the Tarrasch variation, which avoids the potential pin. But knight c3 was played here. Now, the winner variation wasn't used here, bishop b4. There's also the classical, which is knight f6, trying to encourage white to close the center. Instead, d takes e4. For those who haven't got too much time to learn opening theory, you can of course play d takes e4 against both knight c3 and knight d2. So preparing quite well, like a double attack in terms of opening preparation. And in this position, I believe the Fort Knox variation is bishop d7 to c6, often taking on f3 a knight and then playing c6, locking things up and getting rid of the bad piece, in inverted commas, the bad bishop. But here we see another popular move, knight d7, just preparing knight g f6 to challenge that knight in the center. We see knight f3, knight g f6, knight takes, and you might think, well, hold on, instead of knight takes f6, what about knight g3? Although that does keep more tension in the position, black might usefully use that knight on d7 to play things like c5. Also, this knight, it's not clear the aggressive intent later, and it might even be a victim of h5 to h4 under certain circumstances. So this knight takes f6 actually kind of weakens black's control potentially for playing c5, but that still remains an idea to try and isolate this queen's pawn, and also potentially, you know, bishop b4 check could be useful after that. Now here, white takes time to actually stabilize this center pawn here with the move c3. Before developing any bishop, you might think that's slightly curious. It's flexible though, it's keeping a lot of options open depending on black's next move here. Black does not play a routine move to rush to castle immediately. Black actually strikes in the center immediately with c5. And white now just reinforces that pawn with bishop e3, and we see c takes d4 here. White doesn't really want to play c takes d4. Not only there's bishop b4 check, there's a nice blockade square in principle on d5. It would be a nice like queen's pawn. No, white keeps his structure quite nice with bishop takes d4. Controlling the center with pieces, this is a mantra of Aaron Nimzovich. Sometimes you can swap occupation with pawns at the center for piece control, and it's clear white's piece control around central squares is strong here. Bishop e7, and we see bishop d3 now. The bishops look good in the center here. Black castles. Now white plays queen c2, and this does immediately threaten them. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, and bishop takes h7 check. Black parries this threat. h6 is played, getting that pawn out of the way. And white now, of course, does have the choice to castle on either the kingside or queenside. And the scene is set for a very exciting game with castling queenside. So is the white king safe enough on the queenside? You might think this c-file could be dangerous. Black now is also immediately threatened, by the way, with bishop takes f6. If white had a move here, bishop takes f6, bishop takes, and bishop h7 check will be winning the queen on d8. Black not only gets the queen out of the way, but hits a2. White defends with his king. We see rook d8 now being played. And here, knight e5. a very nice looking central knight in this position, eyeing things like f7. Potentially that could be a menace later. It's difficult to even challenge this knight at the moment, because something like knight fd7, there might be this annoying check on h7. And then if king h8, knight takes f7 is mate, for example, mating. So that looks dangerous. You know, it's difficult to challenge this knight at the moment. So we see actually bishop d7 with the idea perhaps of bishop b5. Of course, vacating c8 maybe for a rook later, but bishop b5 just to get rid of that piece could be desirable. Now queen e2 is played in this position, which not only stops bishop b5, but the queen is looking at this pawn chain here near the black king. Maybe in the future knight takes f7 is dangerous. We see now a move which seems to neglect actually that little part of the pawn chain. Knight takes f7, although looking dangerous here, doesn't seem to do too much right now. In fact though, after rook he1, this is now definitely threatened. Knight takes f7, king takes, we would have queen takes e6 check, and queen takes e7. It seems this is a lovely position for white, coordinated pieces, centralized, heavily centralized, controlling the center, but also, you know, black's king doesn't look too comfortable in this position. We see bishop d5. This is a highly provocative move in some respects. It's encouraging white to play basically this forcing move c4, which loosens the d4 bishop a bit in the center. However, doesn't that give white an extra move? c4 is played, and the unthinkable move of taking a pawn in front of the king is actually entertained here instead of just the bishop retreat, which might be a bit safer in some respects. But we see this very daring move, bishop takes g2. This breaks kind of principles, but of course in the longer games you have time to look at the finesses of the position and sometimes break principles. The question is it really justified in this position to nab this pawn? It is hitting this bishop here. Well, if white is given time as well, knight takes f7 is again dangerous for queen e6 as a follow-up. We see bishop c3, and now the queen protects this part of the pawn chain with queen b6. So how do we assess this position? If the rook moves to attack the bishop, then surely knight takes f7 is no longer on the cards. But the queen does seem to be comfortably protecting that e6 pawn for the moment. Can white use this g-file and the bishop's pointing at black's king to make something a dangerous combination or something? Rook g1 is played. And now, in fact, the bishop goes back to c6. Knowing that this battery has been released, the rook has been taken there away from this battery, because otherwise, of course, knight takes f7 would be really strong with this rook supporting the queen, but it's not there anymore. So what has white got here? Is white just a pawn down in this position? It looks to be, in principle, a very strong and dangerous position. In any case, black might be having to consider an exchange sack for a simple move, even like queen d2, threatening queen takes h6. This looks really dangerous, and black might have to consider an exchange sack or something. But a very, very interesting move, not queen d2, was played in this position. Can you guess, if I give you 5 seconds starting from now, what would you play with white? And I consider this one of the most beautiful game continuations I've seen so far this year. I know we're only in April, but to me this is a very, very beautiful game sequence that is now played out. So white to play, what would you play here? 5 seconds starting from now. Knight takes f7, dragging the king out to f7. It has to be taken surely, because white's threatening knight takes h6 now. Can't just be ignored. So the king takes. And what's the point? There's no battery here. There's no queen e6. What's the point of this? You might ask. Can you see white's next move? This is stunning. An absolutely stunning continuation. If I give you 5 seconds now to pause the video, what would you play in this position? Okay, the absolutely stunning rook takes g7 check. White has sacrificed 2 pieces to remove 2 key pawns. Is this a really strong attack? If we play the routine check, maybe king f7 and the king is holding e6. So now actually we see queen takes e6 with rook g1 adding great effectiveness for rook g1 check. If the king's taken away from protecting f6, then things start to collapse, surely. The end here is very short. It seems very, very difficult for black to actually defend this position adequately. There's grave dangers here for black. Immediately queen takes e7 check is threatened, and just scooping up 2 black pieces with mate to follow seems likely. Now Rosen's major concern was this rook g1 check as well as queen takes e7. He at least addresses one of the issues here. He plays queen takes f2. But the game does not last much longer now. We see queen takes e7 check, king g8. And there's 2 very simple and winning moves in this position. One of them is chosen. Can you see the one of the ones that, well, can you see the one that was chosen if I give you 5 seconds starting from now? Okay, bishop h7 check. Devastation. Absolute devastation. If the knight takes, then there's queen g7 checkmate. If king here, then there's bishop takes f6, just winning the queen, and the attack just carries on as well. We can also just take the rook, of course, here. Rook takes d8. So yeah, this is a devastating final sequence. Also, I mean, the position was so strong here that bishop takes f6 is also winning. It seems, you know, how does black handle bishop h7 mate as a threat as well as queen g7? So black would have to give up the queen potentially here. Yeah, this is absolutely a devastating game. A rare game, I believe, that black gets so smashed so quickly in the French defense. So some people have said this is Wesley So's kind of revenge for the use of the rules just to gain victory last year. So Wesley So's a revenge. I hope you got something out of it, and comments or questions on YouTube. Okay, thanks very much.